Contemplative mysticism and contemplative Catholicism is like to me what the saints did back in the day. Like really just adherent devotion to wanting to further their connection as much as possible to the divine, however that showed up for them. So nature is sacred in and of itself, but for me, like when I'm in nature, like, and whether I'm meditating in nature, reading in nature, or just like mindfully taking in nature through sight, smell, and sound, like that for me is contemplation because it reminds me
Mm,
so deeply and easily of my connection to things greater than myself,
right.
and really just reminding me of that awareness that like I'm so insignificant in the larger grand scheme of things. Um, like the other night, my partner and I were chasing the Aurora Borealis because we live in the Bay Area. It was supposedly really, really strong, and we didn't know about it Friday night when it was so clear. And so Saturday night, we're like fucking going into Mount Tamalpais, which is a bit north of San Francisco, and we're like seeking the Aurora Borealis. We didn't end up seeing it, which was sad because it's a thing on my bucket list to see the Northern Light. But I saw two shooting stars, a cliffside where like it was just such an expansive, beautiful view of so many constellations because we were so far from light pollution. Also, because we were going up a hill, there was really dense fog. So once we got above a certain elevation, you could kind of just see like this sea of fog.
Mm,
Although it was super dark at night, but I got a picture on my Lumix of like with the brighter exposure, and you could just see this like sea of fog, which was so gorgeous that we're just
wow.
standing above, and then the constellations and the shooting stars and like all of that. I knew I was gonna cry if I saw the Aurora Borealis. Since I
Oh,
didn't, I was just hardened a little bit, but it's still,
yeah.
it still embodied this just sense of like grandiosity and
Yeah.
insignificance at the same time. And for me, that's contemplativeness,
Yeah, for
contemplative
sure.
mysticism, because it's just when I'm exposed to those things, I create this sense of awe, and it just reminds me of that inherent connection to the divine and how it's within and around.
Welcome to Casual Temple. Our guest today is Rye, who's also known as the Mestizo Mystic. Rye hails from the Bay Area and is a folk Catholic mystic, a devotee of Santa Muerte, tarot reader, diviner, and co-host of the Red Text podcast. Rye, welcome to the Casual Temple. I'm really looking forward to talk about all these cool things with you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I found you. I was kind of, found you on Instagram and like you have a lot of really cool interests and things to say. So I'm really excited to talk today. All right. So we usually just kind of start at the beginning. So can you tell us how the story of how you ended up on your current spiritual path?
Totally. It's a bit long-winded, so buckle up, everybody.
Right.
Um, I've had spiritual experiences and paranormal experiences since I was a kid. They're not as explicit in my memory because it was so long ago, but I remember my mom telling me how like I would cry because I would see spirits, and she and my godmother would just tell me to like pray them away, and I guess it worked at the time. And so, I grew up with these encounters and feelings. I remember times growing up in my parents' house too of like hearing them call my name, and I would go to them and I'd be like, "What do you want?" They're like, "We didn't even say anything." And like looking back on it now with my experience, I'm like, "Oh fuck, was that like a trickster spirit or some shit, or like just something trying to get my attention?" Which is even just creepier thinking about it now. Um, but really my journey began, I'd say like early college years. So this is about like 2014, 2015. A brief background about myself is I was born and raised Catholic, but my family was never super like hardcore Orthodox traditional Catholic. It was very much like we'd go to church on Christmas and Easter, and that was pretty much the only times we would go to mass. Otherwise, my mom excuse me, otherwise my mom would be like, you don't need to go to church to pray. You can, talk to God from the comfort of your own bedroom. So even that was kind of like already like a folk sense of Catholicism because the, church may dictate that you have to like go to church to do that. You're mandatorily required to go to church every Sunday to receive communion.
Mhm.
So my family wasn't as strict about that, but definitely both sides of my family, the Filipino side and the other side that's Mexican and white, uh, hold pretty firmly in their Catholic identities. And so it was always something that surrounded me. Statues of Guadalupe and Mary in my house, crucifixes on the wall, those like cheap looking Ross home decors of like, this is, we love God and shit like that you'd find.
Right.
Um, And so yeah, it was always important to me at the time. And then as I started to come more into back then I identified more as gay in high school, and now I identify as queer. But as I was coming
Hmm.
into my gay identity, I was experiencing this cognitive dissonance of being gay and also being Catholic, because, evangelical Catholicism or Christianity really at the time was promoting this idea that all, gays and queers are going to hell just because of who we are and who we experience attraction to. And oh, excuse me.
Hmm.
And so I was struggling so much of like, can I hold this faith, be a part of this faith while also maintaining truth to my inherent identity of coming into gayness and queerness. And so it just felt unable to be held. Like I couldn't hold both at the same time back then. And so I started
Hmm.
to experience this dissonance where I distanced myself from Catholicism and Christianity. And in college, I began to kind of just explore like very new agey practices. It's when I like found like, got more into like crystals and like, manifestation and all those things that are like very new agey.
Hmm.
And that was my more like deeper intro to spirituality. Well, I use spirituality loosely there, but that was
Yeah.
veering from Catholicism into new territory. And then throughout college, I also began to find interest in like Eastern philosophy and religion. So I started to learn a little bit more about like Buddhism and Hinduism. It's when I started a meditation practice, which I very inconsistent with today, but it is still very integral to my practice, just as a self-care
Yeah.
practice. And so, yeah, it was the New Aginess, and then Eastern philosophy definitely leaned more towards the Buddhist side than Hindu, especially as I was getting a lot more into meditation. But every year, like around the same time, I can't remember the specific times of year. I want to say, ironically, it was Easter, but I'm unsure, where I would find myself like not feeling empty per se, but like something was missing. It was like no
Mm.
matter how much I was into these new age practices or trying to integrate Buddhism and meditation, like it always felt at some point like something was missing, like that inherent connection to something greater than myself.
Mm.
And so I would always try to like dip my toes back into the waters of Catholicism, but again start to feel excluded because of the anti-queer propaganda. And eventually, like right after I graduated, or around the time I graduated college in 2019, I stumbled upon this book called The Way of the Rose, and it's all about using the rosary to connect to the divine feminine, however that shows up in one's life. And in the book, they elaborate more specifically on Mary. Uh, and it was really groundbreaking for me because I hadn't picked up my rosary or prayed a rosary in God knows how many years until I got that book, started praying the rosary. Mary started to show up like significantly more in my life, just so explicitly that I knew it was, meant to be, I was meant to have a connection with her. Um, and I think shortly before read The Way of the Rose, to rewind a little bit, is when I had discovered Santa Muerte through a person's Instagram who I no longer affiliate myself with. But uh, when I discovered Santa Muerte and how she had these roots in in Catholic Mexico, and how she was the patron saint of like the marginalized and the oppressed, including queer folks, and that not one to turn anyone away because death comes for us all. I She was my foot in the door of like stepping back into Catholic territory without feeling like excluded, since she is so accepting. And then it was shortly after I began to devote myself to hers. Then when I found Way of the Rose, and then found myself back to praying the Rosary and Mary, and then at the later end of that same year is when I started my ancestral veneration practice. Forgive my cat, she's choosing to be noisy all of a sudden.
Fine tuned.
Um, and so yeah, so it kind of went like Santa Muerte and then Mary, more specifically Guadalupe, and then my ancestral veneration practice. And those just kind of became scaffolding for what my practice is today. I definitely felt more connected to Catholicism, but in my own personal sense,
Yeah.
once I discovered Santa Muerte Mary in my ancestral practice, and was able to reintegrate it into my life, but from my own worldview and my own perspective and cosmology, kind of integrating all that I'd previously learned, both New Age and Eastern, and a little bit of indigenous philosophy as well. And so Catholicism just slowly and slowly made its way back into my life. And then, oh my goodness, come here.
Hello.
Um, and yeah, it just became a part of my life again. And then I discovered like the term folk Catholicism, I believe, first through J. Allen Cross's book American Brujeria,
Mm,
and that was like a real turning point for me because then I realized, oh, like what I'm kind of stumbling back into like has a terminology and like there is a history behind this. So I knew it wasn't just like me figuring shit out on my own. It really gave me that footing I needed to learn more about kind of the path I was embarking on for myself. Um, and then, over the course of the years, I've taken courses both like on witchcraft, whether that's traditional or folkloric, which I always found interesting. And I don't use the term to identify as a witch anymore, but
mm,
it was also fascinating stuff. But where was I going with that? Yeah, just teachers in the full Catholic practices of different areas, such as like full Catholic Filipinos and
mhm.
Mexicans, and just really learning what that meant for me in my practice. And it just slowly became what it is today, which is just like I said, I identify as a mystic rather than a witch because I really don't do too much like actual witchcraft.
Right.
I can if I want to, but I feel like mystic is more um true to what like my practice is in terms of like prayer, contemplation, devotion, and I don't do like too much magic here and there, mainly just because of life, grad school, and work. But it's still there. I haven't gotten rid of it completely. It's just more of my
Yeah.
practice has shifted more to one of devotion and contemplation. Especially after discovering like what contemplative Christianity was and what that looks like and it's just emphasis on connection with the divine through prayer and embodiment of the true Christian values and not what the institutional church has made it out to be. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a summary of where I come from and where I am today.
Ooh, so meaty, so much there. My goodness. Oh, I have some follow-ups questions because there's like
Yeah.
cool things that I was like trying to tag in my brain. So I'm gonna roll all the way back to I'm curious about when you were a child, did you see those spirits or just hear them?
I think it was both. I
Okay.
have more distinct memories of hearing them like say my name.
Yeah.
But I don't have distinct memories of seeing them. That was more so just what I heard from my mom of like, oh yeah, you would cry because you'd be seeing, shadows and spirits and
Yeah.
stuff. Or she said as a baby, I'd like sit in the hallway and like laugh and like talk to someone as if they were like standing there.
Yeah.
Um, so and of course, children are so much more sensitive to those
Yeah.
things than, when we lose the capacity for that as we get older.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I don't remember seeing them, but I was told that I did.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I have the same. Well, I don't know. I've not been told that I've seen them, but I definitely heard spirits. And the one that was connecting with me, because you said trickster spirits, I was like 100% it was a trickster spirit because it was just all up into some shenanigans all the time.
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't end up being anything like you know, demonic or
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm sure it was just fucking with me because
Yeah.
I don't remember like bad stuff happening uh from hearing them or anything, but it was definitely
Hmm.
like, what was your intentions?
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Just to mess with me? It's
Yeah,
too
you don't
funny.
pay the mortgage here.
I know. Like, get out of here. And so the other question I thought of was an interesting one because you mentioned sort of having like I think you said cognitive dissonance, sort of
Hmm.
being, yeah, like with your like sexuality and then like having to figure out the the Catholicism thing. Um, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are because a recent guest brought this up and I was like, that's interesting because she said, because she suffered some childhood trauma, as a lot of us have, but she feels that like that ability to have that or well, she even call it disassociation, really
Hmm.
kind of she feels like that is something that kind of makes you more open in a like to like the spiritual sense. I don't know if that's making any sense and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I may not know exactly what they were trying to convey, but from my
Hmm.
perspective, like I really think that dissonance was needed, so I was able
Mm,
to learn more about different traditions because I
yeah.
mean, for me, I see like all religions as like I always use this metaphor of a diamond, right? Like the divine, if we picture the divine as a diamond, but all these different facets are how all these
Yeah.
different cultures and societies have viewed that same diamond throughout time. So maybe different cosmologies, maybe different names, but for me, the belief is that at the root of it all, it's still that same spirit, that same divine source, right? Um, and so I think for me, that time of dissonance and exploring like Eastern philosophies and religions and even New Age, which is, it can veer into very alt-right,
Mm,
conspiracy theorist territory, um, were gateways into like getting these new worldviews and perspectives of like, oh, like all I've known was Catholicism and Christianity, and here these things have been, here for however long. And so it allowed me when I came back to Catholicism to now see it through this new view that I had that was influenced through studying oh my God, my cat won't stop. um from learning about those different traditions,
Hmm.
like like um like one comparison I like to make is like how in Buddhism there's the bodhisattvas, and
Right.
these are the people who forego nirvana until they help attain enlightenment for all living beings. And in Catholicism we have the saints who, like, they do die and go to heaven, but they're also working on behalf of um our prayers and interceding on our behalf by helping our prayers reach heaven, or even just physically interceding on our behalf like in the material realm. And so I see a big, huge parallel between bodhisattvas and saints, or I even went to a workshop once where they compared bodhisattvas to angels themselves.
Mm.
And so getting to learn about these different traditions and worldviews and cosmologies helped provide more clarity for me in ways that I never saw things within like my Catholic upbringing.
Oh, very cool. Um, yeah, it's really interesting about all those comparisons, and I like your metaphor of the diamond is, you know, very cool. So I like that. So did you have any support on your path or inspiration, guidance,
Mm.
individuals that you
Um,
talk about?
I think at the very beginning of it, especially before I ever started creating a platform on Instagram, it was very much on my own, which was
Mm,
also daunting because, like,
yeah,
when you're trying to learn about stuff, especially if you're not like going to school for these things, you're very much doing all of this research. And I even use the term research loosely because I was just Googling shit at the time.
right.
um, but yeah, I didn't have any support at the beginning, but once I started getting on Instagram, and again, it did start with my foot in the door in the new age community before extending to more like actual like witchcraft and folk practitioners. It was kind of a solo journey, and then J. Allen Cross, who is Oregon Wood Witch, who just recently actually came back onto Instagram after like a 2 year hiatus, uh, was a big support in that I was taking a lot of workshops through them, and their book helped me a lot. Um, I think there was Daphne La Hechicera, someone else who was also a folk Catholic Mexican practitioner. Um, the curandera, Erica Buenaflor, was a huge support for me as well. I got to go to some workshops of hers in person, and her books on curanderismo were absolutely phenomenal in giving me this new aspect of my practice as well. Because although I have Mexican ancestry on my mom's side, it's very I don't like to go based off percentages, because blood
Oh,
quantum shit, but like,
yeah.
oh my goodness, she won't stop. Um, I'm more on my mom's side, it's definitely more white than it is Mexican,
Mm,
and Hispanic as well. And then on my dad's side is just full Filipino. So I tried to slowly network, or at least follow accounts of those different backgrounds, so I could try to like learn more about my different ancestral connections and like how they were influenced, or influenced through colonization
yeah.
by Catholicism. But at the same time, like that's what leads to them becoming folk practices of like how did these indigenous practices survive through syncretism when forced to adapt to like the colonizers' beliefs, right? But like if you look at the Philippines today, like Catholicism is still a very much inherent part of it, even um, you know, hundreds of years past colonialism. And so uh yeah, I'm trying to I could name so many people, so I won't do that. But like
Right.
I later down the road, as I was learning more and diving deeper more into especially ancestral um connections to Catholicism, I began to find more and more accounts that definitely again became a scaffolding of support. And then it was really when Vogue and I started the Red Text podcast back in late man, I want to say it was late. Oh my Jesus Christ. Just like a little terrorist. Um, when we started the Red Text podcast in late 2021, I want to say, 2021, 2022, that community just naturally unfolded. Like we really just started the podcast as like to have a space to share our own lived experiences and growing experiences as Catholic witches and practitioners. And over the years that we've had the podcast, like it grew and grew, and people would reach out of like, oh my God, like this was so supportive because it finally puts a name to what I've been feeling or what I've been experiencing. And so even though our intention originally wasn't to like create a community, it's what happened. And that's also just been very inspirational and supportive for both Voga and I. And it's what motivates us to keep going with the podcast and to keep networking with folks and meeting really amazing practitioners from various different spiritual and religious traditions. And yeah, I went from just being someone who felt dissonant with Catholicism and diving into New Age stuff to now like knowing so many people of so many different backgrounds and traditions that have like even influenced my practice. So I went from
Hmm.
being solo to having and being a part of this huge mainly online community, but a community nonetheless.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and usually I kind of do things like you were talking about. I kind of dive into things by myself and then like figure it out for a while and then might seek some additional guidance, but I'm definitely
Yeah,
more solo in that respect.
it can be hard to find teachers too if you don't have them readily available, like
Hmm.
in your actual physical community
Yeah.
or local community, rather than like, discernment. Me and Voga always talk about how important discernment is, no matter what you're learning or who you're learning from. Because
Hmm.
there's teachers out there who are greedy and just are out there for a profit and will take
Yeah.
advantage of you, versus teachers who, you know, I never thought I'd discover such a great curandera through Instagram, but
Yeah.
I did, and she's been a great teacher and mentor. So, um, yeah, it's just about discernment. But yeah,
Mm.
Instagram is as much as a cesspool as it can be at times. It's
Right.
definitely gotten me to where I am today.
Yeah, there's definitely some jewels in Instagram, I think. And it's
Mhm.
great that you can kind of get a sense of somebody, at least you know what they put out there, but you can kind of get a sense of who they are as a person. And then your discernment can kind of figure that out from there. Um,
Totally.
so I like that. So I know you mentioned, so we talked about some books, like some of your favorite books. You mentioned The Way of the Rose for sure. That was
Hmm.
very influential for you. Were there any other books that you were like, want to mention? I know there's
Yeah,
probably a whole stack of them, but
so much. Thank God
I
my
know.
bookshelf's not in front of me in my
Right, like,
bedroom and in the
woo.
living room because I just name each one.
Yeah.
So American Brujeria by J. Allen Cross, Mexican Sorcery by Laura Davila. She's definitely like she said on Instagram, but her author name is Laura Davila. What else? A good intro to Santa Muerte is I think it's just called La Santa Muerte, and then like a subtitle, but it's by Tomas Prower. I wouldn't say it's like the holy grail of Santa Muerte books, but for people just seeking out information about her, it is a great intro. Um, Magia, Invoking Mexican Magic and Blood of Brujeria, both by city alchemists. The authors are Alexis Arredondo and Eric Labrado. They're the co-founders and City Alchemist based in, I want to say, Austin, Texas. Um, they've been wonderful teachers of mine as well, and those books are fantastic. I'm trying to think of some other like really, really influential ones. Um, yeah, no, I'm blanking. Those have been some of the most integral ones. I'm trying to think of like any like non-magical ones that were also very influential, but I'm drawing a blank. And if I run to my bookshelf right now, I won't be back for like 30 minutes as I'm like jotting down all the ones I want to share.
Yeah.
Um, if
Um,
I might just tell you after the show
yeah.
and so you can put them in the show notes.
Yeah.
But
Please.
those were some of the main ones that I would say were pretty influential.
Cool. Yeah. That's
Oh, I'm
like,
sorry.
oh, one more.
I I remember any of the books by Erika Buenaflor on Curanderismo are fantastic. Because even if you're not of, Mesoamerican or Mexican Latino ancestry,
Mhm.
as long as you're approaching it with respect and incorporating it into your practice and not proclaiming yourself a curandero, those books I believe hold great practices that one can incorporate into their own practice for healing themselves and helping to heal others too. So any books by Erika Buenaflor, but if I had to recommend one specifically, it would be um not veneration rites. It's I think it's healing rites of curanderismo. I could be screwing up the title a little bit, but it's her book that focuses on limpias, which are the spiritual cleansings. And then one
Mhm.
more book I'm remembering that was also very good was not by her, but that influenced my practice was Honoring the Ancestors by Mallory. I don't know how to pronounce her last name
Mm.
properly. It's like Vaudoise or something like that.
Mm.
But Honoring the Ancestors was a great intro to building an ancestral practice and also providing some like different spiritual workings and stuff that you could do to connect with them. So I highly recommend that book for anyone looking to start an ancestral veneration practice.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Great recommendations there. My goodness. Woo. Thank you for going through those books. I can't believe you remembered all those off the top of your head. That's pretty great.
I
Um, And so kind of what you kind of touched a little bit about like your sort of the aspects of your current spiritual practice today, but can you kind of walk us through either what a day-to-day kind of looks like for you in that respect of, how you connect uh with spirit, I guess. Oh,
Sorry,
I
one
need to know
sec.
your cat's name for sure.
Mariposa.
Mariposa, hello.
Yeah, Spanish for butterfly.
Oh, so okay.
I'm gonna open my door because maybe she'll leave.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, leave me alone. Okay, I guess not.
Okay. She wants to hang out a
Um,
little bit.
she was like hanging by the door and then decided to flee under a chair.
Of
Um,
course.
I'm so sorry. What was the question you just
Oh,
asked me?
sure. What is your sort of day-to-day connection
Mm,
with spirit look like? Yeah.
yeah, so my time management over the last like 6 months plus have been absolute shit. But when I was making time for my spiritual practice, I'm also in grad school, so like that,
Yeah.
I don't want to use that as an excuse, but like my time management's just been so focused on that I haven't focused enough as
Yeah.
much as I would like to on my spiritual practice. But
Yeah.
back in the day when I had made a lot of time for it, it was a lot of smoke cleansing and burning incense. I love burning resins,
Mm.
specifically copal and frankincense. And then really I use a lot of spiritual oils, like even if it's not for spell work, just like anointing it on my skin before I leave for the day. Erica Buenaflor has her own little blends that she makes, and this one I put on almost every single day. It's spiritual intelligent. Oh, come on. Okay, whatever. It's spiritual intelligence. You can get it at realizeyourbliss.com is her website.
Cool.
Um, I have oils of like Santa Muerte, Archangel Michael. I have an ancestor oil on my altar. So like all of these, I'll kind of rotate which ones I use throughout the day, or if I'm like studying or about to go out and do something, I'll intuitively kind of just pick an oil and anoint it like on my palms and do like a little spiritual pass where I'm just like sweeping my hands over my body.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I used to do every single day and evening that I'm a little bit inconsistent with now, but one of my teachers taught me how to do a spiritual pass with Florida water, which is the spiritual cologne where you just put some in your hands and you rub it and you take away from the same thing, kind of just go over your entire like aura and etheric body and dust off any energy first thing in the morning because your soul's
Mm.
coming back from traveling the astral realm, and then in the evening or afternoon whenever you come home from work or being out and about because of all that energy you could pick up while out there. um and they're all like very simple things too. Or like I used to carry little Santa Muerte statues in my pocket all the time. And I don't do it any statues as much. I have like this little Santa Muerte talisman that I carry instead. I have my microphone's blocking it, but I have my Santa Muerte necklace that I wear 24/7. Um Oh, and talismans are a big thing. I have a talisman that I got from this one witch. Her name on Instagram is Aconite Conjure. She's based in I want to say in the UK.
Mm.
Her Dark Star line of talismans or Chef's Kiss. And then I have like a Cruz de Caravaca, a Caravaca cross that I wear pretty frequently. That also has an Archangel Michael medal on there. Um, so yeah, like it's simple because again, I don't do as many elaborate and big workings as I used to in the past, just mainly
Mm-hmm.
because time and energy. But
Yeah.
I definitely try to incorporate these I don't want to say smaller because they're still very meaningful, but these
Yeah.
very more convenient forms of cleansings and just reinforcing my connection to spirit, to my ancestors, to my spiritual court. Yeah, just through the anointing of oils and burning incense. And there's even a excuse me, there's a research that actually shows that frankincense has a multitude of um, beneficial properties when burned, and some of those include like relief or promotion of stress and even helping to relieve symptoms of depression. And
Wow.
so, but like indigenous cultures have burnt these things for ages and
Yeah.
knew about the properties of and benefits that they held, and Western science has just only reinforced the multitude of benefits that brings. So yeah,
Yeah.
my entire birth chart is ruled by fire and air. So like burning shit and incense, like I feel like just is naturally my thing.
Right.
I used to be really into sigils. I used to be really into sigils. And one way that I kind of reconstructed my Filipino folk faith is there's this pre-colonial script in the Philippines called Babayan, and I took a workshop through some mentors of mine in the Philippines of how to use Babayan for divination.
Mm-hmm.
But they also showed us how to I don't know if they showed us how to make sigils or if I just chose to do that, but making sigils out of the Babayan characters, so like translating a word from English to Tagalog, and then from Tagalog into Babayan, and then just messing around to make a sigil. That used to be something I did pretty frequently, which I really enjoyed because to me they just made way cooler sigils than just using like English letters to try to form something.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of what my practice still looks like today. More so just a lot of reading and research and it's the simple practices of incense burning and devotion, lots of prayer. I'm slowly getting back into praying the rosary a lot more. Um, I think that pretty much sums it up for where I'm at the moment though.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty solid, stuff that you're doing. I'm also very curious about the because you use a lot of incense and oils and like scents
Hmm.
and things. I I've heard, because if you think about what like smells and scents are, they're very spiritual because it's
Hmm.
like you can't see it. I mean, you can see the
Hmm.
oil, but you can't see the smell.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a really good connection point for like your spiritual self. And I like the kind of tip about the Florida water because I love Florida water, but I was like, oh yeah, I like the sort of like doing that. It's
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember where I heard it, but oh, it was actually from a professor of mine for my trauma class I just finished. One of the rituals she had us do, I go to a very spiritual graduate program, and
Oh,
that's why I love it so much. It's why I chose it. But my professor, um, for our closing out of the semester of our trauma class, she brought little vials of water and then a selection of essential oils. And we were talking about boundaries. And so, what her intention was to close out the semester with us is we would get to make a blend of different essential oils into our own little vial of water. And it was to remind us of boundaries. So, like, kind of actually basically doing a spiritual path. She showed us to just put
yeah.
some drops of it in our hands and then smell it and go over our body. In my head, I'm like, now, wait a minute. Do you know what this is? Do you know what you're
Hmm.
doing right now, Shanna?
Yeah.
And so I have my own little blend of water. I prefer blending essential oils into like a base, an
Mm,
oil base rather than a water base because I
right.
feel like it lasts longer, and you could use it on candles and whatnot. But anyways, I got to carry that from school, and I forgot where my train of thought was going with that, but just how that's another little spiritual thing I
Yeah.
carry too.
What a cool program though. That's awesome that they're having you do that for like the end of your semester. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you definitely touched on sort of the Catholic, a little bit, you mentioned kind of Catholic folk practices, but can you
Mhm.
tell us what is a Catholic folk witch? What does that entail?
Yeah, I mean, like the SparkNote version is just someone who simultaneously holds both of those identities and beliefs. Like Voga is definitely a full Catholic witch. Like
Mm,
they heavily are into full Catholicism and Catholicism as a whole, but also like very much are, full foot in the bag when it comes to practicing witchcraft. Like they do witchcraft for sure. Um, like I said, I kind of over the years went from identifying as a full Catholic witch to more as just either a folk practitioner or spiritual practitioner and not so much the witch. But yeah, a full Catholic witch in short is just someone who holds both witchcraft and folk Catholicism as integral parts of their identity, but also engages in the two of those. So not just, there's lots of people out there who might call themselves a witch or a folk this or whatever, a chaos magician, whatever it is, but might just be more of an armchair version of that where you're reading more about it and not doing it. I'm
mm,
guilty of having done that for quite a while, but really claiming those titles also involves, doing the fucking
hmm.
doing the work.
Yeah.
So yeah, a full Catholic witch is someone who embodies both of those identities as well as the practices that those entail, is my definition. There's no hard and fast definition, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good sort of insight into what your perspective is on that. That's very cool. And sort of related, because you mentioned that was one thing I wanted to um, have a little more chat about is like the contemplative Christian mysticism, because it's something I just recently learned from one of my guests. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh, I guess I was kind of just doing that myself, like just on, when I meditate with my, just when I meditate or I meditate on because I study the Kabbalah, so I meditate on the Tree of Life quite a bit.
Hmm.
And so I was like, oh, I didn't know that was like a practice and a practice in Christian spirituality.
Right.
Can you tell us, you mentioned a little bit about what that looks like, but can you tell us like what does that mean? Like contemplative
Yeah,
Christian?
I don't have the actual definition
Sure.
off the top of my head,
Yeah.
but for personal definition, it's like
Yeah.
uh, contemplative mysticism and contemplative Catholicism is like to me what the saints did back in the day. Like really just adherent devotion to wanting to further their connection as much as possible to the divine, however that showed up for them. So nature is sacred in and of itself, but for me, like when I'm in nature, like, and whether I'm meditating in nature, reading in nature, or just like mindfully taking in nature through sight, smell, and sound, like that for me is contemplation because it reminds me
Mm,
so deeply and easily of my connection to things greater than myself,
right.
and really just reminding me of that awareness that like I'm so insignificant in the larger grand scheme of things. Um, like the other night, my partner and I were chasing the Aurora Borealis because we live in the Bay Area
Yeah.
and it was supposedly really, really strong. And we didn't know about it Friday night when it was so clear. And so Saturday night, we're like fucking going into Mount Tamalpais, which is a bit north of San Francisco. And uh, we're like seeking the Aurora Borealis. And we didn't end up seeing it, which was sad because it's a thing on my bucket list to see the Northern Lights.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
saw two shooting stars. And then we got
What?
to a cliffside where like it was just such an expansive, beautiful view of so many constellations because we were so far from light pollution.
Yeah.
And also because we were going up a hill, there was really dense fog. So once we got above a certain elevation, you could kind of just see like this sea of fog.
Mm,
Although it was super dark at night, but I got a picture on my my Lumix of like with the brighter exposure, and you could just see this like sea of fog, which was so gorgeous that we're just standing
wow.
above, and then the constellations and the shooting stars and like all of that. I knew I was gonna cry if I saw the Aurora Borealis, but since I
Oh,
didn't, I was just hardened a little bit. But it's still,
yeah.
it's still embodied this just sense of like grandiosity and
Yeah.
insignificance at the same time. And for me, that's contemplativeness,
Yeah, for
contemplative
sure.
mysticism, because it's just when I'm exposed to those things that create this sense of awe and just reminds me of that inherent connection to the divine and how it's within and around us. Like that to me is what contemplative mysticism is. And maybe I'm
Mm,
wrong. I makes me want to Google the definition to see what it actually is. But one Christian or Catholic person I follow who I would recommend for any contemplative mysticism relating to Catholicism, his name's Richard Rohr. That's Rohr. Um, I think did I read one of his books? I may have read one of his books, but I stumbled upon him and his his email list every day like comes out with something for pertaining to a specific theme of the week, and it's related to Catholicism. So there's like, mention of Jesus and whatnot, but it's just the way he talks about Christ and God is just in such a universal sense that
mm-hmm.
like I feel like anyone could benefit from reading about it
Yeah.
and contextualize it to their own cosmology. But his takes on contemplative Catholicism is really what kind of drew me in. And like you mentioned Merrily too, it's like, yeah, I read about it. I'm just kind of like, wait a minute, this is kind of like how I've been experiencing this. And so it
Yeah.
was again like a nice, like when I first discovered the term folk Catholicism, it was just like a nice reinforcement of like, oh, like this is clearly like just either meant to be or just what my ancestors did, because here I am doing the same damn thing and just only now finding like words for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so cool. Um, gosh, there's something you said so many cool things, but yeah, definitely when you were describing this, you're chasing the Aurora Borealis, oh, you couldn't see it, but then you saw a lot of this cool view in this vista, and like my scalp was like, anytime I get all like, like my scalp started to like, my hair started to stand up on my scalp. And so it was such a cool image, and I'm glad you got to see it. I know you're gonna see the Aurora Borealis though, for sure. And
One day.
what? Oh gosh, yeah, one day, yes. Um, so we'll kind of talk too, because you were or also talked about being a devotee of Santa Muerte. So can you tell us what your experience with that? I think you touched on it, but because I think a lot of like me, I'll just straight up say I'm very ignorant about like what that
Mhm.
necessarily means. And you only hear things, probably I only heard about it from watching Breaking Bad. So that's my
Oh no.
so that's my sort of like, okay, I guess that's part of it. I don't know. But so if you can give us a little more insight onto that, be great.
Yeah, 100%. By no means am I a Santa Muerte expert, but
Sure.
I definitely have knowledge I'm willing or not willing. I mean, willing to share, but like able to share.
Great.
I'm not gatekeeping, although I could if I wanted to, but I
Yeah.
won't. Um, Yeah, so Santa Muerte, that's Spanish that directly translates into holy death, or her other titles include Santísima Muerte, which is the most holy death. She is death personified. Like she's not this like Grim Reaper. She looks like a Grim Reaper type figure, as like we would see depicted in like, Western media and culture, but she is death personified. She is the
Mm.
act of death. She is death. And because she has roots in Catholic Mexico, you'll often see her depicted as part of like the Holy Trinity. Because in my beliefs and what resonates with others, I've noticed as well is that Christ had to die on the cross in order to become resurrected and become like the foundation of Christianity. The
Hmm.
whole belief is that we believe in his resurrection, um, and other people say that he conquered death, but I see death and Christ as co-creators. Like he could not have
Mm.
died on the cross without dying. And so
Mm.
in that moment, Santa Muerte was with him and, guided him to the afterlife. Um, and then yes, he was resurrected, but I don't see that as conquering death. I just see that as collaborating with death, really. And so that's how I feel Santa Muerte fits into my cosmology, which probably resonates with many of those Santa Muerte devotees in Mexico who
Mm.
are firm to their Catholic beliefs, but also feel or are marginalized or oppressed in a way in which they feel also heavily connected to La Santa Muerte. And so, like I mentioned, she is the patron saint of the marginalized and oppressed, but sadly, through the majority of media that she's represented in, it's very much in a negative connotation because yes, people that work within the drug cartels turn to her because they work in a field that you may not be coming home that day, like you are not guaranteed to live one day to the next when you're working in something like the cartel industry. Um, and she also protects those of marginalized and oppressed identities, such as the queer folks, trans folks, sex workers, anyone who finds themselves in any culture, in any society, like in the margins of those areas. Um, and so she doesn't turn away anyone because at the end of the day, like we're all going to die.
Hmm.
Whether it's sooner or later, we don't know, but she comes for us all. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone is able to become a devotee because that's a very lifelong title that you take on. Um, and I kind of jumped headfirst into the waters of like when I discovered her, I immediately started identifying as a devotee. I do not recommend doing that because again, it is a lifelong title, it's a lifelong role that you take on when you claim that title. So if anyone's interested in her, I would recommend bare minimum 6 months before you even consider claiming the title of devotee, but at least give it 1 to 2 years to do your research and to give her offerings and to, maybe work on a few petitions with her to see how it shows up in your life. But when you invite death, when you invite La Santa Muerte into your life, like because death also involves, death such as in like endings and not just physical death, you may notice you lose relationships, you may lose your job, you may lose friends, you may lose this, that, and the third, because when you invite her into your life, like things may die naturally, like plants or in some cases I've heard pets as well, but mainly like she's gonna remove from your life what you no longer need because she's bringing an end or a death to those things. So just it's kind of like when TikTok had the whole trend over what was it, Moldavite, of like, oh my
Mm.
God, Moldavite ruined my life. Like I lost my job, I lost my long-term partner, da 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 da. And it's because when I use the new age terms, like it is a very high vibrational stone. It comes from fucking outer space or outer space meteor crash or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, if we're not ready to take things into our lives and yet we're inviting them, like we have to be prepared for us to lose things that no longer align with what what serves us or what's meant to be a part of our life at the time.
Hmm.
So I always recommend the same thing with Santa Muerte, that before you really call yourself a devotee and invite her in as a companion and as a guide, just be prepared to she's like the tower card of tarot. Like it shakes you up and you're gonna be shaken up, but after the tower comes the star in which there's hope and rest and renewal, and new things are able to come into your life once have those unstable foundations taken out. So she's like a reset of sorts too. But she's also been a great teacher of just like reminding me like be grateful for each day that you have, be grateful for each interaction you have. Some of my friends still cringe sometimes when like we're saying goodbye and I'm just like me and my friends openly express saying I love you to one another. Uh but sometimes I'll remind us like, like we might not see each other in a day or so. We never know what's going to happen. And some of them like still get taken aback by that. But for me,
Right.
it's just a reminder of like, it's true. Like I'm treasuring this moment because I don't know when or if I'll see you again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of my constant connection with something what if they and reminder that death could be around the corner for any of us at any time to just really treasure each moment like it could be your last because it very well could be.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thanks for walking us through that. And you're talking, I'm thinking of like, again, because I do the Kabbalah and you talked about the Trinity. And so in the Kabbalah, the highest supernal triangle is Keter, Chokmah, and Binah. And Binah is
Mhm.
the what my cat just stormed in the door. My is Binah is like the one that's the feminine of the supernal triangle and is also associated to Saturn, right? And
Mhm.
so there's that and definitely like the maternal figure in our reality, women, we carry life, but we also carry death, right? Because everybody has
Mhm.
to die. But beneath Binah is another sphere called Geburah. And to me, I've been trying to figure out where Kali, because like I kind of look at the Hindu deities too. I'm like, where does Kali fit? She's definitely kind of Binah, but not really. She's
Mhm.
an emanation of Binah in Geburah, and it sounds very similar to how you're talking about like Santa Muerte, to me anyway, where I'm trying to figure
Yeah,
out correspondences.
totally.
So that was very cool.
No, yeah,
Um,
thank you for bringing that in because I barely have even general knowledge of Kabbalah, so I
mhm.
love getting to hear a connection like that because it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's my framework that I use because it helps my brain to understand things.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But cool. And so can you walk us through sort of because you have a diverse ancestry. I also have a diverse ancestry.
Thanks,
But how
colonization.
I know, thanks, colonization. Yeah. Oh, there's my cat again. Um, so how do you incorporate your my goodness, your cat going? Now my cat's going. How do you incorporate your diverse ancestry into your practice? Or how does it look for you day to day in a spiritual sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So, even though like on my mom's side, like the Mexican ancestry for me is much smaller compared to the rest, like I
Mm,
have a more deeper connection to that than I do like my Italian or Portuguese ancestries. Because
mm,
even though I've like tried to research it, especially because there's so much history in like Italian folk Catholicism and magic and whatnot, like I've always just felt a deeper connection to my Mexican ancestry, no matter how minute that is. So like Guadalupe has always been an inherent part of my family, who you'll also find very apparent in the Philippines as well. Um, but it was really through Erica Buenaflor when I started studying a lot more about curanderismo that I just felt this inherent connection. Like it just felt natural when I started practicing it and incorporating it into my day-to-day magical routines with especially with limpias. Even though it has like Mesoamerican roots. So despite only having like, so and so much amount of Mexican ancestry, this just felt inherently natural to me. And like I know there's many multiracial mixed folks out there who might
mhm,
feel imposter syndrome when it comes to connecting with that part of your ancestry that you might not, I'm using air quotes here, that you might not feel enough of, which I want to name as bullshit because it's in your blood, that's who you are. Um, that just for me was such an empowering sense because I too went through that phase of not feeling, again, air quotes, enough of like this particular race or ethnicity. Um,
mhm,
but like being able to inherently naturally connect with that ancestry through these spiritual practices was also reaffirming in my racial identity. Um, and then same thing with being Filipino. I'm often coded and perceived as Latino.
yeah.
Every time I meet a Filipino person, they're just like, "You don't look Filipino." I'm like, "What the fuck do you want me to look like?" Like, let me go grab a barong out of my closet and like start doing a fucking dance for you, I guess. But so
Right.
that also causes cognitive dissonance and imposter syndrome of
Yeah.
like, am I allowed to claim this Filipino identity despite it
Right.
being the majority of what consists of my blood?
Yeah.
And being more what I grew up in surrounded by my Filipino family.
Hmm.
And so again, diving into those practices, another fantastic book I haven't finished is I think it's called Way of the Ancient Healer by Virgil
Mm,
Mayor Apostol.
yes.
Fantastic book with
Yeah.
such a fantastic amount of well done research, but also Virgil Mayor Apostol, who's based, I want to say, in Southern California,
Hmm.
somewhere down there. He teaches like these in indigenous Filipino traditions, such as like I think he teaches Ablon, which is like a seated form of kind of like massage therapy, but it has spiritual elements to it. Um, and he teaches God, what is it? I can't remember. It's this martial art that incorporates weapons, and I am blanking on the fucking
Eskrima
name right.
or not
Yeah.
Eskrima? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think is it Kalis or something?
Oh, Kali Eskrima. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, on the right track. Yeah. So he teaches classes of that. And yeah, reading The Way of the Ancient Healer was also just there's actually a really cool amount of parallels between curanderismo and like indigenous Filipino
Mm,
spirituality and folk spirituality because again, we were colonized by the same, Spaniards, so you're gonna see blends there. But
yeah.
um yeah, so just reading about the histories and also like noting own like personal gnosis that would arise. Like at one point I felt a connection to the Tagalog deity of the stars, Tala, and I was noticing a lot
Mm,
of parallels between her and the only I forgot to mention the only bodhisattva from Buddhism that I ever felt really, really connected with is Kuan Yin. And then of course there's Mary in my life, and through UPG I found like the three of them are almost one and the same, but also
oh,
again like the diamond metaphor, like completely different facets, even though they have
right.
a lot of overlap in whether that's appearance or devotion and things of that nature. Uh, and so not only was I getting to discover history of these spiritual traditions of my different ancestral backgrounds, it was also um, reaffirming of my own ethnic and racial identity, which I found that wasn't something I anticipated, but it was a byproduct of getting to uh, learn about and explore these traditions. So I always recommend to people, like, I know some people are very like anti-ancestral practices because they
Yeah,
assume that like that it carries having to work with certain like ancestors who were like maybe abusers or like people maybe who are um adopted or part of the foster care system who don't know their backgrounds
right.
are hesitant to approach it, but anyone can approach an ancestral practice, and it doesn't have to be just the ancestors that you're like blood related to.
Hmm.
We have our ancestors of spiritual connections, vocational. If you are queer, you can just connect to those other queer ancestors. Um, and it's so what I was trying to say is like I always highly recommend like uh, learning about your ancestry if you have access to that information and feel comfortable doing so, and then diving into the history of those ancestries and practices, and then just really just trying it out. Because just because you may be like 80% Filipino and 20% white, it doesn't mean you have to only practice those Filipino traditions. You might find that you are attracted to and more easily connect with those practices from your white ancestry.
Hmm.
So really it's a lot of dabbling and discovering what works for you and what you're connected to. Because part of like looking back at my new age practice, I'm like, that had nothing to do with like any of my ancestry of any part of my racial identity,
Right.
which I feel like is why it didn't stick. It was a
Mm,
new age is very also very culturally appropriative and cherry picking of what it, adapts and popularizes. So that's another, critique.
yeah.
But yeah, like look into your ancestry and see what lies behind there, because all of us have such a vast amount of inherent knowledge and wisdom in our ancestral DNA,
Hmm.
that's just waiting for us to tap into it.
Oh, so beautifully said. Yeah, I definitely want to chit chat a little bit about a little bit of spice around the new age
Oh,
spirituality, just a
please. I
little
love
bit.
hot takes.
Okay, good. Um, but I do want to connect on these sort of like I think, growing up because my dad is Irish American and my mom is Filipino, and that I would often have people tell me how much I was of one or the other. And like, oh, you're like 65% this or 30. And I was like, what are you even talking about?
Right.
Just, and I would never do that to any other person because it was so weird to me and like made me feel terrible. And I was like, why are you doing
Hmm.
this? It's so weird.
Yeah, it's like you consist of this like diverse background, and yet
Yeah.
like people are still trying to put us in a particular box.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah. Everybody's always trying to put everybody else in a box. Like, God, just chill out.
I know. Go stay in your own box.
I know, stay in your own box and like just be cool. Anyway. So yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. Had a little PTSD come up about that. So it was pretty funny. Okay, yeah, let's talk about a little bit about you mentioned like new age spirituality and sort of the appropriation around that. And yeah,
Hmm.
we talked a little bit about that before, but let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What part? I
Oh
don't really
gosh,
know
so
where to
many.
start.
Kind of like maybe when you first know, because I, obviously dip my toes into new age stuff too, because I'm of a certain age. And yeah, there was some of it that just didn't hit, and some of it that just felt kind of, I don't know, fluffy and not very deep,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of, you know.
Yeah, I can't even remember what exactly was like the first like new agey thing, like what sparked it. It's just I just remember
Mm,
getting into it, and
yeah.
definitely was through crystals. Crystals was like a huge
Oh yeah.
entryway, and that's not to deny like the inherent spirituality of like these stones and minerals. It's just like
Yeah.
how are you connecting with them? You know, like from which
Hmm.
way are you approaching working with these parts of the earth, these parts of nature, um, rather than just like assuming that you're going to get this one crystal and it's going to heal every aspect of your life, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, like manifestation, ugh, it's been so co-opted into this idea that like, oh, you only have to think a certain way to attain what you want, which is so just dismissive of, again, like socio-cultural, economic, oppressive
Right.
institutionalism, or institutionalized oppression and systemic racism. Because like at the end of the day, they're just like, no, 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 you just gotta think hard enough and about what you want, and it'll come to you. And it's very spiritual bypassy,
Yeah.
which is like a huge aspect of at least what I've encountered with New Age spirituality is it's all love and light, and it doesn't really dive into, like, I feel like it's very surface level when it talks about shadow work, like, but
Yeah.
shadow work is so much deeper and dirtier and
Yep.
darker than what New Age spirituality makes it out to be.
Hmm.
Um and so it's just and like I said, it's very culturally appropriate in that it like takes a lot from like Eastern spiritualities and indigenous spiritualities, and it just cherry picks what it wants to use and just says like, oh no, but like we're all the same, like this is all the same spirituality, and that's again just inherently dismissive to those different cultures and contextual um, backgrounds of those cultures. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just I mean, there's elements of New Age spirituality that I think hold their worth. I don't know which ones of those I would name right now, but I think overall it can be just very dangerous because I've noticed a lot of overlap and bleeding of New Age spirituality, like I mentioned earlier, into like
Hmm.
alt-right beliefs and like
Mm.
anti-vaxxing and um, flat earthers. Like often you'll see like those type of beliefs held within a New Age spirituality space because it's just so open to fucking adapting and inheriting whatever beliefs they really want at that point.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's my take on that. Like, I think New Age spirituality can serve as like a gateway into learning more about alternative spiritualities, but it's not
Hmm.
like the end all be all, and definitely has, I feel, much more critiques than it does benefits at times.
Yeah, really well said. Yeah. I'm thinking of, because you mentioned early on about discernment, and to me, I feel like that's a lot of that is missing, at least when I was
Mm,
looking at new
mm-hmm.
age stuff, because it's like, it's not, I don't know if it's not encouraged, it's just definitely not talked about. So it's like, meaning like, oh, just here's the information, and that's what you
Yeah.
do. And then like, okay, but why? It's like, to me, I need to
Mm-hmm.
know, like, my brain, I need to know, like, how does this really fit in? You're just telling me, and I need to know, like, what cult, because like when you're talking about like look at your own ancestry and culture, like that makes sense. There's like foundation there, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when it's like this new age stuff, like where are you getting this?
Right.
Yeah, you're just making it up. I mean, you can make an argument about some of that, but
Yeah, yeah. It's hard too, like, because when you're searching for new meaning, especially like when you're leaving something like Christianity, or
yeah,
even if you just got out of like a cult or something, right? Like you're very
right,
open, or you can be, people can be very open to whatever's gonna bring meaning back into their lives and
right.
connection to spirituality and however they conceptualize the divine. And so if New Age is your foot in the door to that, that's great. But then if you're just diving into nothing but New Age, you can find yourself spiraling into, again, conspiracy theories and falling into the
Mm,
wrong groups of people who often will just utilize New Age spirituality as a means of spiritual bypassing and really not doing the actual work
right.
that's necessary on oneself. Um, and it's very despite like preaching community, I feel like it's also very hyper individualistic,
Mm,
because it's all focusing on like you and yourself and manifesting your desires and like,
right.
love and light cut negative people out, and it's really bypassing of like conflict and discourse and anything that goes against like the whole love and light spectrum, at least from what I've witnessed.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's not that. Yeah, the discourse is missing in a lot of it,
Hmm.
and is like, yeah, you don't really get to the root of sort of the things. And I do like sort of ceremonial well, I wouldn't even say it's necessarily do ceremonial magic anymore, but more magical practices. And a lot of that is
Hmm.
changing yourself, right? Like instead of saying, oh, all that out there is all the wrong things, but really it's like, how am I like reacting to all those wrong things? And you can't get past into that if you're like in the new age sense because you're like, oh, I'm just putting out all this positivity and I'm only thinking and like it's all outwardly facing and it's never like
Hmm.
looking on the inside of like where am I actually reacting in a way that's harmful for me and the community, like
Hmm. Right.
yeah,
And then it pinpoints all the blame on the individual. Like, oh, you're not
right,
manifesting this. It's because you're not, you're not thinking hard enough. You're not feeling it hard enough. And
exactly,
again, bypassing and overlooking all the different systemic factors that affect someone's access to whatever it is they might be wanting to try to manifest.
yeah, exactly, oh my gosh, yeah. Whew. All right, new age spirituality, let's figure it out, guys. Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for walking through that.
Totally.
So can you tell us like about your podcast, the Red Text podcast, and with your co-host Voga? So what do you guys get
Yeah.
up to there? Yeah.
Yeah, oh my God, it's also full of a lot of hot, spicy takes. Voga pointed it out to me, but they were listening to previous episodes of our first season and like
Mm.
juxtaposing it against how we sound in our second season, and they were telling me like we both sound so fucking jaded. Like we sound so hurt. Like we sounded so like
Oh,
naive and bright-eyed in the first season, and then the second
right.
season just like fucking not dismal and depressed,
Sure.
although half the season I was depressed.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, just like I think again it comes from that place of like we just gathered so much more discernment and experience that like a lot of the things we may have talked about or hold views as in the first season just naturally, shifted along as our practice did into what we hold now. And even
Right.
as we're coming back from our hiatus and starting to record again, we might even sound even more different than we did in the beginning of the second season because
Yeah.
again, as you're doing work on yourself and building community and learning more and growing more, you're gonna have, I'm hoping that you have different beliefs and they shift and change just as much as anyone does along their journey. But yeah, so the podcast, we have so many different guests from so many different backgrounds. We've had hoodoo practitioners, we've had folkloric and traditional witchcraft witches on there. We've had um I'm trying to think, we had like Olivia, the Witch of Wanderlust on there.
Mm.
Um yeah, we've had so many people on our show. We actually have an episode with our friend Franny. I forgot what their new Instagram handle is, but at the time they went by the Wicked Witch of LA or something like that. Um, but we have a whole episode on Santa Muerte with Franny as our
Yeah.
guest because they're also a very dedicated devotee of Santa Muerte. And so not only do we try to bring a bunch of people in from different backgrounds with different knowledge of different areas because we
Mhm.
want to uh talk about things that even Vogue and I are unaware of and hold space for. And then like usually every other episode is just us shooting the shit about a topic that we came up with, whether it's something like, color magic or the different days of the week or protection magic and things of that nature. So really just going into sharing what we know and have learned about whatever topic that we're covering. And oftentimes we'll start each episode just checking in with one another to see how we're doing, which ends up being like anywhere from 10 to 20-minute long
Right.
conversations that are not related to the episode at all. So for a warning for new listeners who want to explore the red text, just be prepared for our banter that's anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes before the actual episode starts. But I like our witty banter.
Yeah.
I feel it adds a little personable aspect to it all. Um, Sometimes it can get out of hand, but I like it. Uh, but yeah, just a lot of talking about what we've learned and continue to learn and how
Cool.
we're growing as both individuals and practitioners of whatever it is that we are practicing, and then bringing on new folks from different areas to enlighten us about things that we either had little or no knowledge of previously, and getting to I almost said interrogate, but getting to interview them about their practices to learn more about it for ourselves as well as for anyone who decides to listen.
Well, yeah, I love it. Yeah, I personally love like chit chat before podcasts because I'm always about, oh, I want to know what are they up to, like
Yeah.
I'm big on that. So very cool. Um, so I know that you also have you do some client work with tarot and divination readings. Can you
Mhm.
tell us how you work with folks on that?
Yeah, at the moment it's still just divination via tarot, but I took down my square calendar thing from our square appointments from my Linktree calendar. At least I hope I did. But when I am available, yeah, I provide tarot readings either deliverable through email if you don't feel like doing a face-to-face Zoom reading, or if you just
Right.
my Zoom readings cost slightly more than just what an email-based reading would, since I have to schedule a block to sit with someone.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I do readings over Zoom or whatever, virtual meeting space is most accessible for me and the client, and then emailed readings. Occasionally I'll do like flash readings on my Instagram story that are like usually donation based for as low as like $3 to $5 for like a 1 to 3 card reading. So you
Hmm.
can kind of get like a sample of what that looks like from me. Um, but yeah, I love tarot. It's my main form of divination, I'd say still, although like there's other forms that I'm always trying to learn. But I haven't really dove into any other form of divination as deep as I have with tarot at this point in my life. But
Mm.
like I've dabbled with corn divination. I've been feeling like I want to learn like divination with like dice or some form of like number system. Uh but yeah, tarot, I love tarot. I eventually want to like practice offering dream work with people because I
Ooh.
think dream interpretation and dream work is really fascinating.
Yes.
Um, but that's really been the main service I offer. I don't think I've really ever offered spell work like that.
Mm.
I don't know if I will, just out of time, resources, and energy that it takes.
Yeah.
Um, other things, yeah, that's mainly what I offer. I don't know what else I'll add to the repertoire quite yet, but that's what I have and do offer with tarot. So I used to have a link that you could schedule appointments through on my bio on Instagram, but you can also just hit me up through DMs and let me know if you're interested in a reading and we can set something up.
Cool. Do you have a favorite client story that you're like, oh yeah, that one was pretty interesting that you want to share?
Yeah, I did a year ahead reading for one of my close friends, and one of the biggest themes, my year ahead readings are probably like the most detailed reading you could ever get from me because it covers like both the whole year as well as each individual month and like elements
Right.
within each month. And so I'd done one for a friend of mine, and I didn't think it was necessarily talking about her and her ex breaking up, but that ended up being what was happening. But like I remember the theme of the reading just being like, oh yeah, like it's gonna be a really intense period of like discovering who you want to keep in your life and who's really like lifting you up and bringing you down and sorting through that. But then she
Mm.
ended up going through a breakup with her ex, who was I mean it was the breakup was needed, but
Yeah.
it just I didn't say they were gonna break up, but like in the back of my head I'm just like, oh, I wonder if this is what it's talking about, and it just ended up being that. I also always say like I'm a great tarot reader because I will forget whatever I gave you a reading on, so you don't need to be worried about me like gossiping about whatever was said or brought up in a
Yeah.
reading, because the moment it's done, the moment it's just like out of my head and out of my awareness. So
Right.
anytime someone reapproaches me and they're like, "Oh my God, everything you said was so accurate and came true," I'm just like, "What did I say?"
Yeah. What did I say? Yeah.
So I'm great with confidentiality, if that means anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
but I'm trying to think of any like other intense stories. No, I'm drawing a blank, but the one with my friend's breakup was definitely one that stuck out for me.
Yeah, that's pretty intense on all levels. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So where can folks find out more about you and all the cool things that you do?
Yeah, really my main page and source of information is my Instagram, which is at the Mestizo Mystic, and Mestizo is spelled Mestizo. I don't plan on changing my handle anytime soon, and I haven't been super active with making posts. I've mainly just been interacting with folks that have are followers of the channel that I have on Instagram, as
Mm,
well as just posting stuff to my story, mainly just in relation to Palestine and the ongoing genocide there and around the
right.
world. Um, but I haven't been too active with making like actual posts. But I'm definitely like a creep and just scroll and like, and you'll see me comment here and there.
Right.
So I'm definitely there, and if you send me a DM, I'll always get to it at some point.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm definitely like not standoffish by any means. I think my Mercury's in Leo and I'm a Leo sun, so I naturally don't shut the fuck up. So if you want to talk, I'm here.
Like,
Um,
I'm here. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, I eventually will have a YouTube. I've said that for years now, and I will continue to say that for years until it happens. But there will
Right.
be a YouTube eventually.
Uh-huh.
Um, my friend Flo, the trans folk witch, has helped me set up a Discord. I need to finalize some things with the Discord, but
Mm,
I wanted a space where people can interact more with one another and not just like
yeah.
one-on-one with me. Um, and like really make an online community. So that should hopefully be up and running in a few weeks.
Cool.
And so if you subscribe to my channel or I don't know if you subscribe. It's like those channels on Instagram you can have now, those broadcast
Oh, that's
channels.
right. Yes, the
If you
broadcast.
mine is called I think it's yeah, Capua Mágica. Um, and if you follow that, you will get to know when the Discord's up and running because I told them they would have first dibs on invitations. So if you want to be invited to Discord, join my little channel there.
Yeah, everybody get on it. That's really cool. Yeah, I'll have to look for that definitely, and because I want to get in there too. That sounds awesome. Okay, so what words of wisdom do you want to leave us with today?
Oh man.
Small questions,
Geez.
yeah.
I know, small questions. Oh, let me think on that. I have many words of wisdom. At least I like to think I do.
Yeah, take your time, no worries.
Um, just know that like you are enough in however you show up. Like no one gets
Mm,
to define what enough looks like for you except for yourself. Um, do the work, don't be afraid of it. The more you put it off, the more you're just stagnating your own growth. And when you do that, you also stagnate the amount of authentic connections that you can build with other people. So, for me, like the more I've seen myself grow, the more I've been able to grow my relationships with loved ones, with friends, with family. Um, and so just know that if you're scared of stepping into the power that you hold, you're also keeping yourself from getting to explore so many opportunities that are probably the ones that you've been, wishing for or desiring. So only know that by holding yourself back, you're holding growth in all the other areas of your life back. And also just take it step by step, day by day. Don't If you want to lay out a whole plan of how you want to grow over the next few years, by all means do that. For me, that's overwhelming.
mm,
My mentors have told me that like a lot of the stagnation through periods of my practice is because I've just grown um, either tired or overwhelmed from what I used to do. Like I used to have a very elaborate morning spiritual routine, and it has become so minimized compared to what it used to. But that's what allows me to still feel like I can access it. Because when I think
yeah.
of, oh, I want to do the stuff that I used to do 2, 3 years ago, um, I get so overwhelmed with like the amount of what I would do, as well as like shame and guilt that I no longer do that.
Mm-hmm.
And my teachers were just like, just start with waking up and thanking, whoever for blessing you with another day, or like, thank the sun, or like thank your water, like do the smallest steps possible until you feel that you can work your way up to something that's not necessarily intricate or elaborate, but like is a good stage for you that is maintainable. Uh
Yeah.
so don't be so hard on yourself is what I think I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Ah, I love it. That's great advice for sure. Oh, well, thanks, Rye. It's such a pleasure. It's so great to get to know you and
Yeah.
all your cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I always love getting to be on other people's podcasts and just never stop talking.
Right. I know. That's like the wonderful benefit of it. So thank you. Your support means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others who might find this content valuable. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more enlightening discussions. Your engagement helps us grow, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being a part of the Casual Temple community.